Welcome back to Afro Asia Diaries. Before we start, drop a comment and tell us where in the world you're watching from tonight. If you're new here, hit subscribe. Let's begin. 4 days before her wedding, Amara found the sentence that would end it. She wasn't even looking for trouble. She was looking for a stapler. It was almost midnight in the Kong family's Seoul office, the kind of glass tower that made her neck hurt from looking up at it the first time she'd visited. Amara had come back for a folder she'd left on her desk, a set of blueprints for the community center she'd designed, her first real commission since moving here for Junho. The office was empty except for the hum of the servers and a single lamp burning in the legal department 3 doors down. She noticed it because the light shouldn't have been on. She told herself she was just curious. She told herself a lot of things that night that weren't true. The document sat open on the paralegal's monitor, forgotten, the way important things get forgotten by people who think no one else will ever read them. Amara almost walked past it. She actually did walk past it 3 steps before something pulled her back. Maybe it was the word she'd caught out of the corner of her eye. Intellectual property. She didn't touch the keyboard. He just read. And the longer she read, the colder the room got, though the thermostat hadn't moved. Clause 14.2. Any designs, patents, structural concepts, or creative works produced by the second party during the marriage shall be assigned in full to the Kong Family Trust. Clause 16.7. The second party agrees to submit all major life decisions, employment, place of residence, personal associations, to review by a designated family representative. Amara read it 3 times because the first 2 times her brain refused to translate it into something real. A designated family representative. She didn't need a law degree to guess who that meant. She'd met the woman exactly 6 times in 8 months, and every single time, Junho's mother had looked at her the way you look at a stain you're deciding whether to bleach out or just replace the whole carpet. Her phone buzzed. Her sister, Ijeoma, calling from 3 time zones away, the way she always did right when Amara needed her most, like some invisible cord still ran between them since childhood. "Hey," Amara whispered, even though there was no one left in the building to hear her. "I need you to look at something. Tonight. Please." She photographed every page with shaking hands, sent them before she could talk herself out of it, and sat down on the cold floor of a law office that wasn't hers, in a country she'd moved across the world for, holding a phone like it was the only solid thing left standing. Ijeoma called back 19 minutes later. Amara knew before her sister said a single word, just from the silence that came first. "Mara." Ijeoma's voice was careful, the voice she used back home when she had to tell their mother test results she didn't want to give. "This isn't a prenup. This is an acquisition agreement with a wedding attached to it." Mara laughed. "Came out wrong, cracked down the middle. Don't be dramatic." "I'm a corporate lawyer, Amara. I don't do dramatic, I do documents. You would lose every single thing you build for the rest of your life. Every drawing. Every award. It wouldn't even legally be yours anymore the second you signed it. And this clause here." A pause, papers shuffling somewhere in New York. "This one lets his mother decide where you live. Not him. Her." Amara pressed her palm flat against her chest like she could hold her own heart in place. "Junho would never agree to this. Did he show it to you himself?" Silence. Because he hadn't. It had come through his mother's office, through a paralegal named Yoon Hee who'd smiled too widely and said, "Just a formality, sir, standard for families like ours, sign wherever you see the tabs." Amara hadn't even read past the tabs. Why would she? He trusted him. She trusted the 11 months of him staying up past 2 a.m. sketching alongside her on napkins, arguing gently about whether concrete could ever be beautiful, learning to say her mother's jollof recipe out loud in Korean until he got the tones right just to make her laugh. He loved a man. She had not read the fine print on his family. "I need to talk to him," she said, standing, legs unsteady beneath her like she'd forgotten how they worked. "Amara." Ijeoma's voice dropped, gentler now, the big sister voice, the one that had talked her through every heartbreak since she was 14. "Before you talk to him, ask yourself something first. What? Does he even know this exists?" Amara stood in the empty hallway, blueprints for a building she may never legally be allowed to call her own tucked under one arm, and realized she did not know the answer to that question. And somehow not knowing was so much worse than if she had. Amara didn't sleep. She sat on the edge of the bed in Junho's apartment, the one they were supposed to share properly after the wedding, and watched the sun come up over the Han River like it owed her an explanation too. By the time Junho walked in from his morning run, sweat still on his collar, smiling that easy smile that used to undo her completely, she'd already decided how she was going to say it. He said it wrong anyway. "Did you know," she said, "no good morning, no hello, that your mother wrote a contract that takes everything I build and gives it to your family? That she gets to approve where I live?" Junho stopped mid-stride, water bottle halfway to his mouth. "What are you talking about?" "Clause 14.2, Amara said, and her voice didn't shake, which surprised her because everything else in her was shaking. "Clause 16.7. Look them up. It's in the prenup. The one your lawyer sent for me to sign." She watched his face do something she'd never seen it do before. Not anger. Not denial. Confusion first, pure and unguarded, the kind you can't fake, and Amara held on to that like a rope over water because if that part was real, maybe the rest of him still was too. "That's not," he started, "that's not what we agreed on. We agreed on the standard version. Assets stay separate, that's it, that's all we talked about." "Then who added 60 pages to it, Junho?" He didn't answer right away, and in the silence, Amara understood that some part of him already knew exactly who, even if he didn't want to say the name out loud in his own kitchen. "My mother wouldn't," he said, then stopped himself because they both heard how thin it sounded coming out. It was his cousin, Taeyong, who said it plainly 20 minutes later, when Junho called him over in a panic because Taeyong worked in the family's legal office and Junho needed someone who could actually read the document instead of just feeling sick about it. Taeyong was younger than Junho by 4 years, sharper around the eyes, the kind of relative who'd learned early that surviving the Kong family meant staying useful and staying quiet. He read the pages standing in the doorway, jaw tightening with every paragraph. "This came from your mother's office," he said finally, not looking up. "Yoonhee drafted it on her direct instruction. I've seen this kind of language before, Hyung. She did the same thing to your sister's husband before the divorce." Junho went very still. "You knew," Amara said quietly, and it wasn't an accusation, not really, more like a question she needed answered before she could feel anything else. "I knew there was history," Taeyong said. "I didn't know she'd try it again. Not with someone your mother actually seemed to like." That word "like" sat wrong in the room because liking someone and wanting to own them had apparently never felt like a contradiction to Madame Kong. Junho crossed the kitchen and took both of Amara's hands, and for 1 second, just one, the old pull was still there between them, that same electricity from the night they'd met at the site visit, arguing over a support beam like it was the only thing that mattered. He leaned in, close enough that she felt his breath before his lips, close enough that 4 days ago she would have closed her eyes and let the world go quiet. She stepped back instead. "Not until this is fixed," she whispered, and it cost her more than he would ever know to say it. Junho's jaw clenched, not at her, she realized, but at himself. "I'll talk to her today." "No," Amara said. "I will." Because Ijioma's voice was still in her head from the night before, and she finally understood what her sister had really been asking her. Not does he know. But what will you do now that you do? She picked up her coat, and behind her she heard Taeyong mutter something low in Korean to Junho, something she didn't catch, but whatever it was made Junho grab his own keys and follow her out the door without a single word of protest. Neither of them noticed the black car already idling outside the building, the one that had been parked there since 6 a.m. waiting. Madame Kang's office smelled like white tea and money, the kind of clean that costs more than most people's rent. She didn't look up right away when Amara walked in, Junho a step behind her, still typing something on her phone with the unhurried calm of a woman who had never once in her life been made to wait for anything. "Amara," she said finally, setting the phone face down. "I wasn't expecting you until the fitting Thursday." "I found the contract," Amara said. No greeting. She'd promised herself in the elevator she wouldn't waste a single word being polite about this. Something flickered behind Madame Kang's eyes, gone so fast Amara almost doubted she'd seen it. Then the woman smiled, small and controlled. Yoonhee was supposed to hold that version until closer to the date. Hold it, Junho repeated slowly. So you knew I hadn't seen it either. You were busy, his mother said, like that explained everything, like it always had. I was handling the details the way I've handled every detail of this family for 30 years. You think your father's company survived 3 recessions because I waited for permission to protect it. This isn't the company, Amara said. This is me. My name would be on those patents. My work. Madame Kong finally looked at her directly, and there was no apology in it, only a kind of tired patience, the look you give someone who hasn't yet learned how the world actually works. Do you know what happened to Junho's sister? Her husband took the apartment design she spent 2 years on, put his own name on the patent, and by the time the marriage ended she had nothing to show for it but the memory of making him look brilliant. I will not watch that happen twice. For one disorienting second, Amara almost understood her. Almost. Then you could have protected me, she said, voice cracking despite herself. Instead of making me the one who loses everything if it doesn't work. You didn't write a shield, Amma. The word slipped out unplanned, the term she'd been practicing in private for months, the one she'd never actually used to Madame Kang's face until this exact wrong moment. You wrote a leash. The room went very quiet. Get out, Madame Kang said, not loudly, which somehow made it worse. Both of you. Come back when you're ready to discuss this like adults, and not like a foreign girl who thinks she understands how a family like ours protects what's ours. Foreign girl. 2 words, and every insecurity Amara had swallowed for 11 months came rushing back up at once. Every stare on the subway, every auntie at church events who complimented her Korean like she'd performed a trick. Every time she'd wondered if she would ever just be Junho's fiancé and not the American, the outsider, the exception being made. She didn't cry. She refused to give the room that. Junho grabbed her hand and pulled her out before she had to find out if she could keep that promise to herself. They didn't speak until they reached the parking garage, and even then it was Junho who broke first, leaning against the car, running both hands through his hair like he was trying to physically hold his own head together. I'm sorry, he said. I'm so sorry, Amara. I didn't know she'd say that to you. But you knew she'd say something. He didn't deny it. That was the part that hurt more than the meeting itself, the not denying. She looked at him under the flickering garage light, this man she'd built a life around in a country that wasn't hers, and felt the pull toward him and the urge to run from all of it fighting each other in her chest at the exact same time. He reached for her face, thumb brushing her cheekbone so gently it barely counted as touch, and for a second neither of them moved, the space between them thinner than it had any right to be. Her phone rang before either of them could close it. Ijeoma again. Amara answered on speaker, mostly to have an excuse to step back. Mara, her sister said, breathless in a way she never was. The wedding blog just posted the guest list confirmation. Says 400 people. Says Saturday. It says nothing has been postponed. Amara looked at Junho. I didn't do that, he said quickly, but the look on his face told her he already knew exactly who had. 2 days left and nothing had been fixed. Junho called his mother 11 times. Amara counted because counting was easier than feeling anything else while she waited. Madame Kong answered exactly once, only to say the lawyers were reviewing the language and there was no need to involve outsiders in a family matter. Outsiders. As if Amara wasn't the one whose name was supposed to be in the contract at all. The rehearsal dinner was set for Friday night at the Kong family's private hall overlooking the water. 400 guests confirmed, half of Seoul's construction industry, 3 television cameras from outlets that covered the Kong family the way other countries cover royalty. Amara stood in front of the mirror that evening in a dress Madame Kong had chosen without asking her, and did not recognize the woman looking back. You don't have to do this tonight, Junho said from the doorway, tie undone, looking like a man walking toward something he already knew was going to hurt. We can push the wedding. Give the lawyers more time. Your mother told the blog it's Saturday. She told 400 people it's Saturday. You think she's giving anyone more time? Amara turned to face him. This is the plan, Junho. Wear me down until I'm too tired, too embarrassed, too far from home to say no. She's not slow-walking the lawyers. She's counting on my silence. He didn't have an answer for that because there wasn't one that made his mother look good, and she watched him choose in real time not to defend her anyway. The hall was beautiful in the way expensive things are always beautiful. Chandeliers over long tables, orchids flown in from Jeju, a string quartet playing something soft enough to talk over. Amara moved through it like she was underwater, shaking hands, thanking people for coming to a wedding she no longer knew if she wanted, while somewhere behind her Madame Kong glided from table to table collecting compliments like a woman gathering rent. It was Taeyong who found her by the terrace doors, phone in hand. She had the final draft sent to the venue's printer this morning, he said quietly, no greeting, just facts the way he always gave them. Same clauses. 14.2, 16.7 untouched. She's having copies bound for the guests as a keepsake. A program of the marriage, she's calling it. Amara felt something in her chest go very still, the way water goes still right before it starts to boil. She's putting it in front of 400 people. I think, Taeyong said carefully, she wants witnesses. So you can't quietly walk away from it later without it looking like you broke something sacred. Amara looked across the hall at Junho, laughing politely at something an uncle had said. A man built entirely out of other people's expectations of him, and understood with total clarity that if she didn't do something in the next 10 minutes, she would spend the rest of her life inside a contract disguised as a marriage. She walked to the small stage before she'd fully decided to. The quartet stopped. 100 conversations died at once, the way a room does when it senses something is about to happen that it will talk about for years. Madame Kang's smile didn't move, but her eyes did, sharp and sudden, landing on Amara like a slap. Thank you all for coming, Amara said, and her voice, to her own surprise, did not shake. Most of you know me as Junho's fiancé. Some of you got a very nice keepsake tonight with your dinner. I'd like you to actually read it. A ripple went through the room, confused laughter, someone's fork setting down. There's a clause on page 4, Amara continued, that says everything I ever designed during this marriage belongs to the Kong family, not to me. There's another on page 6 that says my own mother-in-law gets to approve where I live. I didn't write those. My fiancé didn't write those either. His mother did and had them delivered to me like they were routine. She turned finally to Junho, whose face had gone the color of the tablecloths. I'm not calling off how I feel about you, Amara said, quieter now just for him, though every camera in the room caught it anyway. I'm calling off marrying into a family that thinks loving me and owning me are the same thing. If that's a problem you can fix, Junho, you have until Saturday to prove it. If it's not, then we were never getting married anyway, and it's better we all found out tonight. She stepped off the stage into total, ringing silence, 400 people watching to see if the heir of the Kong dynasty would go after her or let her walk. Amara didn't go back to the apartment that night. She went to Igioma's hotel room instead, sat on the end of the bed still in the dress she never wanted to wear, and let her sister hold her while she finally cried. Not pretty tears, ugly ones, the kind that come from a place that's been holding too much for too long. You did the right thing, Igioma kept saying over and over, like repetition could make it feel less terrifying. I don't know what I did, Amara whispered. I just know I couldn't do the other thing. Friday passed in silence. No calls from Junho. No message. Amara checked her phone so many times the screen stayed warm in her palm, and each time it was empty. Something in her chest quietly agreed to stop hoping. She was packing on Saturday morning, folding the wedding dress back into its garment bag to send to no one in particular, when someone knocked on the hotel door. It wasn't Junho. It was Taeyong, out of breath like he'd run from the elevator. You need to turn on the news. Now. Igioma found the channel first. There was Junho standing in front of the same construction site where he and Amara had first met, arguing about a support beam that neither of them had been right about. Cameras from 3 networks pointed at him, no tie, no jacket, looking like a man who hadn't slept either. My family built half this city, he was saying, voice steady in a way Amara had never heard from him before, and I used to think that meant we got to decide what everything is worth. My mother taught me that. I let her teach me that. He paused, looked directly into the camera like he somehow knew Amara would be watching. I was wrong. Amara Adeyemi is not an asset. She is not a liability to be managed or a line item to be assigned to a trust. She is the only person who has ever made me want to build something that wasn't for my father's approval. Behind him, Taeyong held up a folder, and even through the small hotel television, Amara could see the paper inside, could see her own name typed where the trusts used to be. I had the prenup rewritten last night, Junho said. One clause. Everything either of us creates stays ours. No approval clauses. No family representative. If my mother can't accept a marriage where I don't own my wife, then she doesn't have to come to the wedding. But I would like my wife to. The reporters erupted with questions. Junho didn't answer a single one. He just looked at the camera a moment longer, then walked off toward a car that was already waiting. Amara's phone rang 40 minutes later. Not a text this time. A call. "I'm outside," was all he said. She found him in the hotel lobby, still in yesterday's clothes, holding the folder like it was something fragile he'd carried a long way to give her. "You didn't have to do that on television," she said, throat tight. "Yes, I did," Junho said. "You told 400 people what she did in private. I needed 400 people and about 6 news channels to hear me undo it." He held out the folder. Amara opened it with shaking hands, and there it was, 1 page instead of 60, her name beside his. Nothing owned, nothing conditional, nothing that belonged to anyone but the two of them. "This doesn't fix your mother," she said quietly. "No," he agreed. "But it fixes us. And I'd rather build a life with you and figure the rest out slowly than build a perfect family that costs me you." She stepped closer, close enough to feel the warmth coming off him, close enough that the space between them finally felt like an invitation instead of a warning. When he leaned in this time, she didn't step back. She let herself feel the question in it, the same electric pull from the first night they argued over concrete and beauty. And this time she answered it, meeting him halfway, slow and certain, the kind of kiss that says, "I choose you not because I have to, but because I finally can." The wedding happened 3 weeks later than planned, in a small garden instead of a grand hall, 40 guests instead of 400. Madame Kong did not attend. But Amara didn't spend a single second of that day thinking about the woman who tried to own her. She spent it looking at a man who had chosen, in front of the whole country, to lose everything his mother promised him rather than lose her. And for the first time since she'd landed in Seoul, Amara felt like exactly what she was. Not an outsider. Not an acquisition. Home. And that's the end of the heir's contract. If this one got you, tell us in the comments which act hit hardest. Subscribe to Afro Asia Diaries for more stories like this one, and we'll see you in the next story.